Lupe Velez became synonymous with Hollywood's girls go wild craze during the golden era of filmmaking. She likely suffered from bipolar disorder, with her mood swings ranging from withdrawn and depressed in private to explosively energetic in public. She was infamous for her quick temper, uncontrollable outbursts, and unpredictable behavior. Known for hosting Hollywood's most outrageous parties, she loved being the center of attention. There's no doubt that Lupe Velez was one of the wildest women to ever make it in Hollywood. But there were many aspects of her life beyond her shocking antics. She was adored by her fans, and the men who loved her never got over her. However, all the while, a terrible darkness was brewing in her that would lead to one of the most unforgettable scenes of tragedy in the history of Hollywood. This is the wild, wild story of Lupe Velez. Welcome to Hollywood Mysteries. Lupe was born Maria Guadalupe Villalobos Velez on July 18, 1908, in San Luis Potosí, Mexico, apparently during an unusually violent thunderstorm. Her father was a colonel under Porfirio Diaz, and her mother was a singer at the Mexico City Opera. The family enjoyed a comfortable life with servants and a roomy home. However, Diaz's 30-year rule ended when Lupe was 2, and this was the catalyst for major changes in Mexico. Diaz's decline led to 2 decades of civil war. Incredibly, she was soon accompanying her father to various battles of the revolution. As Velez later said, this violent but formative experience made her fearless. When American kids go to kindergarten, I was riding with my father in the Mexican army. I saw the horse of my brother shot beneath him. I saw many men try to kill my father. I saw my father kill other people. It was my first school, this revolution. I did not cry. I did not have goose pimples on my flesh. I do not have fear of bullets. This last statement would certainly ring true later on, as Gary Cooper would find out. In the midst of war, Lupe, now 13, was sent away to Our Lady of the Lake University in San Antonio, Texas. She had become rebellious, and her parents were concerned about her 21-year-old boyfriend, so they decided it was time for her to be straightened out at a religious school. She learned English here and became fascinated with dance classes. Although she frequently clashed with the rules, she also enjoyed challenging the nuns and any other figure of authority. Back home, the war was intensifying, and even Mexico City itself was becoming embroiled in the fighting. However, terrible news was about to fall on the Villalobos household. When Lupe was 15, her father was reported to have died in battle in Mexico City. This forced her to leave school to support her mother, 2 sisters, and brother. As it turned out, her father was merely missing in action and would return to the family once he had been recovered, some years later. Lupe had no regrets about leaving school, which she found dull and restrictive, although she did well in academic testing. Lupe's first job was as a salesgirl at Fowl Outfitters, a large department store where she earned $4 a week. This was a good wage at the time, and she landed the job thanks in part to her English skills. After the new government confiscated their home, the Villalobos family moved into a cramped 2-room apartment in a dilapidated hotel. Lupe's salary was their sole income, so she urged her engaged sisters to marry and move out to ease the family's financial pressure. Lupe herself had no plans to marry, but this was not due to a lack of suitors. On the contrary, Lupe had grown up to be particularly beautiful. Lupe was a petite woman, standing just 5 feet tall and weighing 105 pounds. From her teenage years, Lupe's stunning face won her numerous admirers. Around this time, Lupe frequently visited the local theater to watch the actresses perform, as well as taking in as many movies as she could fit into a day. One day, she approached the stage manager and told him how much she wanted to be part of the show. When he asked if she could dance, and she said she could, he offered her a position in the chorus. But Lupe protested loudly. "The chorus? No. I won't go in the chorus." She insisted she was more talented than anyone she had seen perform there, and proved it by jumping on stage and singing an American jazz song. Impressed by her performance, the manager agreed to hire her for a solo act at 15 pesos a day, conditional on audience approval. It turned out the audience was not Lupe's problem. They enjoyed her act, but her fellow performers were far from impressed. They resented her immediate jump to a solo performance without prior stage experience and tried to undermine her. The Mexican Actors Guild intervened, insisting Lupe prove herself a first-rate actress before continuing on stage, effectively banning her from her job. Lupe decided to take matters into her own hands. She ran on stage between acts, played her ukulele, danced the shimmy, and told her regular risque stories. She explained her situation to the audience and asked for their support. Her lively performance won them over, leading to 3 days of sold-out shows and the promise of a potential audience riot if she were excluded. The guild relented, and Lupe quickly became the most beloved entertainer in Mexico. She was soon earning 45 pesos a day, the highest pay for any stage performer in the country at that time. She was a sensation, and every performance sold out. Their mother introduced Velez and her sister Josefina to the popular Spanish-Mexican vedette, Maria Conesa, known as La Gatita Blanca. Velez made her debut in a show organized by Conesa, where she performed "Oh Charlie, My Boy" and danced the shimmy. In 1924, Aurelio Campos, a young pianist and friend of the Velez sisters, recommended Velez to stage producers Carlos Ortega and Manuel Castro. Ortega and Castro were preparing a season review at the Regis Theater and decided to bring Velez on board in March 1925. Later that year, Velez took the lead roles in the revue's Mexican Rataplan and No Lo Tapes, both of which were parodies of shows at the Bataclan in Paris. About a year and a half later, feeling she deserved a raise, Lupe approached the stage manager at the Teatro Principal and asked for a cut of the profits. When he refused, she quit. The theater's revenue plummeted without her, and under pressure from the audience, the manager asked her to come back, but she had already been hired by the rival Teatro Lirico on 100 pesos a day. However, she was ready to move on to new challenges at this time, and her mother had sinister plans to capitalize on her star power. When she started in vaudeville, her mother effectively began working as her madame. She arranged for the highest bidder to spend evenings with her, which could often fetch thousands of pesos. These evenings with Lupe were bringing the family back to financial prominence, but were already weighing heavily on Lupe's fragile temperament. She likely was suffering from undiagnosed bipolar disorder, and while her frantic, nervous energy made her a scintillating performer, she also experienced moments of severe darkness. At this time, she was performing as Lupe Villalobos, but when her father finally returned from the war, he was horrified to discover that his daughter had become a stage performer, and under his own noble name, no less. The only thing that would diminish his fury was changing her name to her maternal surname, Velez. Some of her fiercest rivals included Mexican vedettes such as Celia Padilla, Celia Montalvan, and Delia Mañana. But instead of embroiling herself further in these catty fights in the press, she was dreaming of something bigger, and the opportunity was about to arise. As Lupe was planning to expand her stage career in Cuba, she received a telegram from a Mr. Woodward, a talent scout who had seen her perform. He had sent a telegram to his friend, stage actor Richard Bennett, father of film stars Barbara, Constance, and Joan, praising Lupe's beauty and talent, and recommending her for a part in Bennett's play, The Dove. Shortly after, Lupe received a telegram from Bennett himself, offering her a chance to audition for a play with a weekly salary of $250. Overwhelmed by excitement, Lupe mistakenly thought she had already secured the role, not just an audition. The Mexican newspapers, catching wind of her interview, prematurely announced, "Lupe Velez goes to Hollywood." At that time, Lupe owed considerable money to various creditors who, fearing she would flee and leave them unpaid, took legal action by obtaining debtors' warrants. They gathered at her house with the police to confront her. However, a quick-thinking newspaper boy helped her escape by disguising her in a baby buggy and wheeling her past everyone unnoticed, a scene that could have been taken from one of her later comedy films. Lupe left Mexico with only $20, but she didn't have it for long. On her train ride to Los Angeles, a handsome and well-dressed man seated next to her flirted continuously with her. When Lupe reached for her money to tip the porter upon arrival, she discovered it was missing. The charming companion, who was in fact a professional thief, had stolen it. Upon reaching the studio in Los Angeles, Bennett immediately told Lupe she was too young and too slender for the role. Determined, she went backstage and borrowed props from the wardrobe department to appear older and fuller, adding fake hips, breasts, and makeup to create under-eye bags. However, when she presented herself again, the director laughed so hard he cried, leaving Lupe both angry and humiliated. The role was awarded to 28-year-old Dorothy McKay instead, and Lupe stormed out. Bennett covered her hotel expenses for a week, wishing her luck, but like so many others in Hollywood at that time, she found herself broke and jobless. Nevertheless, Lupe chose to stay in Hollywood. She could easily have returned to Mexico to continue her lucrative life as a famous dancer and highly desirable companion for Mexico's elite men, but she had other ideas. Bennett was impressed by this commitment, and so he helped her secure a position as a so-called atmospheric dancer at Sid Grauman's Egyptian Theater. This job involved performing themed dances relevant to the films being shown. For instance, she would dress as an ancient Egyptian for movies about Egypt, or as a flapper for gangster films, adapting her performance to fit the setting. Special compositions were played at these performances, and the dancers would shimmer and shine as they energetically danced throughout the theater, while the images of the latest hit movie played on the Grauman screen. Thanks to Bennett, Lupe managed to get by in Hollywood, yet Bennett's final act of intervention was pivotal in launching her movie career. He was hosting the Hollywood Music Box Review on Valentine's Day, February 14th, 1927, and envisioned Lupe making a dramatic entrance by jumping out of a giant paper heart to sing and dance. The performance exceeded all expectations. The audience was thrilled by her act, leading to an offer for her to join the production permanently for $35 a week. Lupe, nicknamed the Tropical Hurricane, eagerly accepted. However, the show eventually closed on April 7th, 1927. Interest had dropped, largely due to star Fanny Brice rehashing her old routines, which the public had grown tired of. But Brice and Velez became good friends. Fanny said Lupe was the most fascinating person she had ever met, so she set Lupe up with a gig for Flo Ziegfeld, who hired her based on Brice's recommendation. Maybe Ziegfeld in New York would be the answer to her American dream, and not Hollywood. Before she could leave for New York, she had an exciting telephone call. It was MGM producer Harry Rapp on the line, and he wanted the wild dancing girl he'd spotted at Grauman's to come in for a screen test. The test went well and led her to being hired by Hal Roach for a small part in the next Laurel and Hardy short, Sailors Beware. She made another short for Roach, and her movie possibilities were expanding rapidly. She would have another opportunity to work for Ziegfeld in the future, but for now, Hollywood was suddenly opening its doors to Lupe Velez. Later in 1927, Ted Reed, a talent scout for Douglas Fairbanks Sr., also spotted Lupe Velez performing her atmospheric dancing. Impressed by her vivacity, Fairbanks, who was searching for someone to play a wild mountain girl in his upcoming film, The Gaucho, decided that Lupe was ideal for the part. And so United Artists, Fairbanks Studio, offered the 19-year-old Lupe a 5-year contract. She was on her way fast, but it was not exactly clear what the destination would be. In The Gaucho, the plot revolves around a girl who, after falling from a cliff in the Argentine Andes, mysteriously gains healing powers. A shrine is erected at the site of her fall, and a city develops around it, thriving on the gold offerings from devotees. However, when a corrupt general seizes control of the city, steals the gold, and shuts down the shrine, the gaucho leads a group of bandits to reclaim it. Lupe, in a brief role as a tango dancer, delivered a spectacular performance. The film premiered at Grauman's Theater in Hollywood on November 24th, 1927, with ticket prices set at $1.50, 6 times the usual cost. With all this fanfare, it was a disappointment that the film received generally negative reviews, but Lupe was praised highly, and most agreed she was the best thing about the movie. Her name was in the papers now, and she quickly became known in the press as the Mexican Wildcat, or the Hot Tamale. The New York Times picked up on her, describing her performance. Lupe Velez acts the part of the mountain girl, a termagant quickly fired to anger. Whether she is in rags or laces, she gives blow for blow to the men who get in her way or incur her anger. She too springs on horseback, never heeding for an instant that she is arrayed in silks and laces. Her following movie was a Cecil B. DeMille picture, Stand and Deliver. In it, Lupe portrayed Yanya, a peasant girl who is saved from a burning building by a British soldier who had joined the Greek army during World War I. The film is largely forgotten today, but a print is in existence, and Lupe's astonishing cinematic charisma is already on display opposite her co-stars, Warner Oland and Rod LaRocque. This appearance led her to appear on the prestigious Wampas Baby Stars list for 1928, an annual list of the 13 young actresses considered most likely to make it big in the movies. Previous alumni included Fay Wray, Joan Crawford, Loretta Young, and Mary Astor, among others. Lupe Velez was on the rise. There was no doubt about it. If you want to know more about Lupe Velez, we'd recommend the brilliant Eve Golden's Strictly Dynamite, The Sensational Life of Lupe Velez. It was only released in 2023, and it is as sensational as its subject matter. It's a great book that's helping to reestablish Lupe's reputation as an important icon in Hollywood history. If you grab a copy on Kindle or on paperback via the Amazon link in the description, we get a small kickback at no extra cost to you, which really helps out the channel. Otherwise, why not check out the links to our picks of some of Lupe's finest cinematic moments, currently available on Amazon. The full Mexican Spitfire collection on DVD is a truly zany ride through the kind of movies that will never be made again. Take a look and come back to the comments to let us know what you think of them. But for now, back to the video. Around this time, she dated Charlie Chaplin for a brief period. Next, she was involved with Tom Mix, a top-paid Hollywood star, some 28 years her senior. However, as his career waned, and his style of cowboy roles fell out of favor, Lupe ended the relationship. Back on the market, a friend suggested to Clark Gable that he pursue Lupe, but Gable declined, seemingly intimidated by Velez's high sex drive. Contrary to his hyper-masculine screen image, he had received less than stellar reviews from past partners like Joan Crawford and Carole Lombard, his future wife, who commented on his lackluster skills. Gable feared he wouldn't meet Lupe's expectations, and that she might publicly criticize him for it, so he politely declined. Lupe Velez next entered into a relationship with the popular singer Russ Columbo, but she quickly lost interest and they soon parted ways. Carole Lombard then began a relationship with Columbo, which tragically ended when he was killed in an accident involving an antique pistol. Lupe Velez continued her acting career with Lady of the Pavements in 1929, a film directed by D.W. Griffith. In the movie, a German count portrayed by William Boyd, who would later become known as Hopalong Cassidy, finds out his fiancée has been unfaithful, so he declares he would prefer to marry a street woman over her. His fiancée decides to take him at his word and arranges for Lupe, a disreputable singer from the Smoking Dog Cafe, to seduce him. However, when his jealous fiancé exposes Lupe's true background, the Count chooses to accept Lupe as she is. This film was the first time Lupe sang on screen, In that same year, she starred opposite Lon Chaney in Where East is East, directed by Todd Browning. Lupe Velez's performance in the film didn't receive particularly enthusiastic acclaim. Photoplay magazine made a pointed comparison, stating, "Compared to Estelle Taylor, who played Madame de Silva, Lupe Velez's work is like a candle beside a 1,000-watt light." Nonetheless, she moved on to another sound part talkie, Wolf Song, directed by Victor Fleming. The film set the press ablaze due to Lupe's scandalous simultaneous romantic involvement with both the director, Victor Fleming, and the star, Gary Cooper. The film itself, a Western about a man who is torn between his love for the independent life of traveling around versus his newfound passion for his Mexican lover, also caused a stir. Cooper appears almost entirely naked while shaving in a river, which was shocking even for a pre-code film. The public interest in Lupe's romantic escapades boosted the film's performance, turning what was otherwise a mediocre movie into a box office success. Fleming in particular had a reputation similar to Lupe's, both being quite unrestrained with the opposite sex. Lupe famously remarked, "I like him because he is a devil with women, but I am more of a devil than he is. That is why I never fell in love with him." Their fling was brief, ending with the film's completion, though they parted amicably, and Fleming continued to help her career. This liaison was perhaps Fleming's least serious, but surely one of the most memorable. Lupe's view on romance was unconventional for the time. She found pleasure in inflicting pain during sex. She always made sure her partners were the type of men who wouldn't retaliate, those who enjoyed her claws and teeth, in other words. After nights with Lupe, both Gary Cooper and later Johnny Weissmuller would arrive at their film sets needing extra makeup to cover the bite marks and scratches that she left on them. Lupe, who also portrayed in the media as promiscuous, pursuing virtually every man in trousers. It was well known in Hollywood that she had liaisons with nearly every director and leading man she worked with. Lupe cherished her independence and sought to dominate her relationships, preferring subservience from men rather than partnership. This stance often meant her relationships were short-lived. On the other hand, her career looked far more stable by now. She was becoming a bigger star with each picture, but she was also undeniably being typecast. Her repertoire of press nicknames had expanded from the Hot Tamale and the Mexican Wildcat to include the Mexican Hurricane, the Mexican Madcap, and Whoopi Lupe. In 1929, Lupe took on a role in Tiger Rose, her first film with full dialogue. The studios had already consigned her to the group of actors that they deemed unlikely to stand a chance in talkies, due to their strong accents when speaking, but they decided to give her a shot in this full talkie. The movie revolves around a Mountie who is chasing a murder suspect. Lupe portrays a French-Canadian. The film's major attention went to Rin Tin Tin, the canine star, who overshadowed the rest of the cast. But Lupe also found her voice was positively received by audiences, and the studios realized she did have a future in sound films after all. That said, Lupe's lines were usually sparse, often just repeating stereotypical phrases like "me understand." Her heavy Mexican accent limited her possibilities severely in dramas or romances, but opened the door to comedy, where she exaggerated her accent and mannerisms for laughs. Lupe embraced the Mexican Spitfire image to the extreme. In fact, no amount of typecasting could keep up with her real-life behavior in terms of wildness. In truth, Lupe would begin to find it impossible to keep up with herself. She was famous for her fiery temper and outlandish actions, a persona created for publicity that she struggled to maintain because it was largely an act. In her early years in Mexico, she was lively, but not yet totally out of control. This behavior seemed to emerge only after she realized comedy was her niche in Hollywood. Lupe became trapped by her own exaggerated character. One thing to establish here is that the reality and the myth of Lupe's life are often inseparable. Some of the stories here will sound extravagant and incredible, and some of them probably are. On the other hand, there are likely things that took place in Lupe's life that no one knew about, which were even wilder than those widely reported in the press. While we can't verify the truth about everything Lupe reportedly did, we can tear down the one terrible lie that surrounded her passing. She had to continually escalate her eccentricity, and her parties became infamous at Hollywood's Wildest. Always seeking attention, Lupe would dance to Latin music at her parties, and before long lift up her dress to show she was not wearing underwear. Her guests were also entertained with stag films, as adult movies were known at the time, and cockfights. She would frequently end up in brawls with female guests at her parties. Once she threatened to slash the throat of a woman who showed up to her party in a red dress, even though the invitation specified it was an all-white dress code. Aside from never wearing underwear, she also proudly announced that she never bathed, preferring to let her natural pheromones work their magic. She was often seen chewing gum, which dangled from her mouth. Living up to her wild Spitfire image, she carried a loaded pistol and a stiletto in her garter, and she was ready to use them when angered. "My poor family," she told Screen Secrets. "They never know what to do with me. My 3 sisters like to be ladies. They make me nervous. Being always so good like a lady, they have no fun." While her involvement with Fleming was winding down, Lupe's relationship with Gary Cooper began to intensify. Lupe was immediately taken with Cooper. She felt she had finally found a man with whom she had a strong sexual compatibility. Despite being nearly 30, Cooper was still very much under his mother's influence, living at home, which made it easy for Lupe to dominate him. Publicly, Lupe declared Cooper to have the largest penis in Hollywood, but privately she constantly criticized and demanded more from Cooper sexually, in a constant battle to maintain his submission to her. Lupe managed to dominate Cooper, but his mother Alice was a different story. Alice viewed Lupe as entirely unsuitable for her son, disparaging her in the press as low-life trash. She was aware of her son's deference to her, so Alice frequently warned him of Lupe's infidelity, accusations that were not entirely baseless, given Lupe's reputation. Whenever Alice sensed her son's relationship with Lupe might lead to marriage, she threatened to end her own life to deter him from marrying Lupe. Consequently, Cooper never proposed to Lupe. He was emotionally torn between his suspicions of her infidelity, his mother's fierce emotional blackmail, and concern over how marrying her would affect his wholesome public image. Deeply in love, yet frustrated by Cooper's inability to stand up to his mother, Lupe's temper flared. Cooper was also, of course, a major movie star, and recognized as one of the most handsome men on earth, which inflamed Lupe's extreme jealousy at almost every turn. His affairs with Marlene Dietrich and Carol Lombard were particularly painful for Lupe, but she was even more jealous of his intimate relationship with his friend, Anderson Lawler. In revenge, Velez called legendary actress turned gossip columnist Hedda Hopper and revealed that Cooper and Lawler were sleeping together. As according to one actor who witnessed the scene itself, she had insisted that Cooper could only pursue his relationship with Lawler if she was included in all their sexual encounters. When she found out that they had been sleeping together without her, she denounced Cooper to Hopper, a move that could have ruined more than just his career back in the 1930s. During one Hollywood party, Velez grew suspicious that Cooper had disappeared with Lawler. When he returned, witnesses reported that she unzipped Cooper's pants in the middle of the gathering and sniffed his genitals, ostensibly searching for traces of Lawler's cologne. And yet, despite what sounds like an incredibly toxic relationship, Cooper was smitten. An interviewer asked him about the best thing filmmaking had brought in his life. Cooper responded with an exceptionally romantic reply, simply stating, "Lupe." She increasingly lashed out at Cooper, who remained passive. This dynamic left Lupe spiraling out of control and becoming a physical threat to the mild-mannered Cooper. She lashed out with her stiletto knife in one rage and stabbed him, a wound that required several stitches. After 3 years together, Gary Cooper reached his breaking point due to his relationship with Lupe. His health deteriorated significantly, with heavy drinking and depression leading to a weight loss of 40 pounds and a nervous breakdown. His doctor advised a year's rest from work and from Lupe's presence. Paramount, however, granted Cooper only 5 weeks to recuperate in Europe without Lupe. Cooper planned to leave discreetly on the 20th Century Limited train to Chicago, but Lupe discovered his plans and confronted him at the station. As Cooper was about to board the train, Lupe pulled out a gun and shouted, "Gary, you son of a bitch," firing a shot that missed him by inches. During his recovery in Rome, Cooper became involved with the middle-aged Countess di Frasso. He was relying on her wealth to support him through his recovery, as he was nearly broke. In 1933, Cooper married Veronica Rocky Baff, a New York socialite, but the marriage was tumultuous from the start, and Cooper engaged in several affairs, notably with Marlena Dietrich, Grace Kelly, and Patricia Neal, whom he impregnated. Despite ongoing affairs, Cooper stayed married to Rocky for the sake of their daughter, maintaining his relationship with Neal until she ended it in 1951. Cooper's final years were miserable, and he died of prostate cancer in April 1960. Lupe, on the other hand, claimed she had ended the relationship after rejecting Cooper's marriage proposal. Proud and angry, she alleged that neither Cooper's parents nor Paramount had approved of the match, and since she didn't truly love him, she chose to end things. Lupe also depicted Cooper as a weak-willed mama's boy, manipulated by his mother Alice, who she said constantly maligned her. This portrayal was a facade to mask her own embarrassment and pain over being rejected by Cooper. Later in life, Lupe confided to friends that she regretted not marrying Cooper and that he had been the great love of her life. In 1931, she starred in her second film for Cecil B. DeMille, Squaw Man, alongside Warner Baxter, and she also starred in Resurrection, directed by Edwin Carew. The following year, Velez appeared in the Cuban love song with the famous singer Lawrence Tibbett, and that same year she had a supporting part in Congo, which was a sound remake of West of Zanzibar, alongside Walter Houston. Additionally, she headlined Spanish-language versions of some of her films produced by Universal Studios, such as Resurrección and Hombres en mi vida. In February 1932, Velez took a hiatus from her film commitments and journeyed to New York City. There, she was finally able to work with Florence Ziegfeld Jr. to assume the role of Conchita in the musical revue, Hacha. The production also featured Bert Lahr, Eleanor Powell, and Buddy Rogers. She later appeared in Hacha for 119 performances, and then in 1933, Strike Me Pink for 122 performances. She would return to Hollywood after this, but was back on Broadway in 1938 to star in You Never Know. In You Never Know, Lupe played a maid impersonating her mistress, who is being pursued by a baron pretending to be his butler. The show featured Libby Holman as the mistress, who quickly developed a dislike for Lupe. She believed that Cole Porter was favoring Lupe with too many songs, causing Holman to feel upstaged. Their tension escalated to a physical fight during a curtain call, resulting in Holman getting a black eye. This defeat was despite her height and weight advantage over Lupe. Lupe, not content with just winning the fight, threatened to murder Holman, prompting the stage manager to escort Holman to and from the stage for safety. Unable to get near Holman due to the increased security, she devised another cunning plan to try and break her rival's neck. She knew Holman had poor vision, so Lupe took to urinating on the polished floors, leading to the stage, hoping Holman would fail to see the puddle and slip and fall. Thankfully, this never occurred. The show toured major cities across the U.S. before its New York opening. However, Lupe's performance was not well received, and Vogue magazine criticized her, saying, "Lupe Velez had no more dignity than a donkey." Holman was, unsurprisingly, far from the only woman to inspire Lupe's wrath. Velez frequently singled out fellow actresses she considered rivals, whether in their professional endeavors or personal lives. This was a pattern that originated during her vaudeville career and persisted into her film career. Velez cultivated a public persona characterized as wild and highly sexual, outspoken and unapologetic, which contrasted with the image of fellow Mexican actress Dolores del Rio, who projected sensuality with elegance and restraint. Velez held a strong animosity towards Del Rio, whom she called a bird of bad omen. Del Rio, in turn, was nervous about encountering Velez in public settings, as Velez would react with sharp and confrontational remarks, even threats. Velez openly mocked Del Rio, satirizing her refined demeanor and supposed snobbishness. Furthermore, Velez had a seething hatred for Marlene Dietrich, whom she suspected of having an affair with Gary Cooper during the 1930 filming of Morocco. Her rivalries with Jetta Goodall and Lillian Tashman were similar to the one she engaged in with Holman. In response, Velez would deliver cutting impersonations of these disliked individuals at Hollywood gatherings, as well as other prominent figures such as Greta Garbo, Fanny Brice, Gloria Swanson, Katharine Hepburn, and Shirley Temple. In 1931, Lupe had a fleeting romance with the former silent film star, John Gilbert. Given Gilbert's own issues with alcohol and instability, their relationship was turbulent and short-lived. Gilbert's circle largely viewed Lupe negatively. They told him to choose between his friends and her, and perhaps wisely, given his fragile state by that time, he chose his friends. But Lupe was soon moving on to a man who was more to her tastes. Lupe first encountered Johnny Weissmuller in a hotel lobby, immediately taken by his stature and athletic physique, proclaiming, "He is my type of man." Despite Weissmuller being married, Lupe invited him for a drink the same night, and their affair soon erupted. He was exactly what she was looking for: physically powerful, handsome, and sexually masochistic. They soon became inseparable, and shortly after Weissmuller's divorce, they married on October 8, 1933. Aside from movies and wild partying, Lupe Velez's greatest thrill was boxing, which she attended every Friday night. However, Lupe wasn't just there to watch. She was an event in herself. She would dress to kill, arriving in glamorous attire and laden with jewelry. Lupe typically made her entrance during the second round, at which point the lights would dim, and the announcer would introduce her and Johnny Weissmuller as Lupe and Tarzan. The boxing would halt momentarily, as all eyes shifted to Lupe. She would gracefully walk to her ringside seat, acknowledging the crowd with waves and blowing kisses. Once seated, she would stash her jewelry in Weissmuller's coat. Lupe vocally supported her favorite boxer using shockingly crude language, occasionally leaving her seat to offer pugilistic advice or even threaten his opponent. On one occasion, she leapt into the ring and violently attacked the referee with an umbrella. Even her trips to the restroom were met with applause, timed to her steps, and she reciprocated with more waves and kisses. Lupe also might wager up to $1,000 on a match, and would spend her winnings freely if she won, often leaving the venue hoarse from her enthusiastic cheering. Lupe Velez's love for boxing inevitably led her into a relationship with a boxer, specifically the former heavyweight champion, Jack Johnson. Their affair was brief and kept under wraps, because Johnson was black, and the public exposure on an interracial relationship at the time could have ended Lupe's film career. Johnson, on the other hand, had been at the center of America's racial politics since the early 1910s, when he married a white woman and then had the temerity to defeat the white hopeful James J. Jeffries in the ring, leading to race riots all over the nation. Johnson had opened a chain of desegregated restaurants, but was then imprisoned under the Racially Motivated Man Act, which forbade one to transport a woman across state lines for immoral purposes. The woman in question was his future wife, But the jury did not see this as any obstruction to giving him a 1-year sentence for his supposed crime. Many years after his death, Johnson was given a full pardon by President Trump, following decades of refusal by previous administrations. Lupe and Weissmuller would become known as one of Hollywood's most tumultuous couples, alongside Humphrey Bogart and Mayo Metho, and Errol Flynn and Lily DeMita. But Lupe was the most outrageous of them all. Before another former heavyweight champ, Jack Dempsey, married Estelle Taylor, he had a brief fling with Lupe. While Dempsey initially found Lupe amusing, her erratic behavior soon pushed him away. Lupe became close friends with Dempsey's wife, Estelle, and began sowing doubts about Dempsey's suitability as a husband, suggesting that marriage to a prizefighter would harm her acting prospects. Estelle grew so fond of Lupe that when Dempsey tried to exclude Lupe from their home, Estelle insisted that Lupe was her best friend and would always be welcome. Eventually, the strain became too much for Dempsey, leading to their divorce in 1930. For Weissmuller, even sleeping was no escape from her sudden outbursts, as she might unexpectedly hit him with a shoe or slap him as he slept. If anyone dared to challenge Weissmuller, hoping to boast about facing down Tarzan, Lupe would retaliate physically, often striking the provocateur to protect her man. Weissmuller discovered soon after their marriage that he and Lupe were fundamentally incompatible. She was nocturnal and sociable. He preferred daytime and tranquility. She was a smoker and heavy drinker, while he abstained from both. She disliked swimming, which he loved. The only trait Weissmuller shared with Lupe was her sense of humor. Despite her exaggerated portrayal of broken English for the cameras, when questioned about her language skills, she humorously responded, "Everybody says, 'Why don't you learn better English, Lupe dear? I was married to a guy who can only say, me Tarzan, you Jane. How can I learn English from him?'" Ultimately, their differences were too vast, and there was not enough common ground to sustain their marriage. On January 24, 1934, less than 4 months into her marriage, Lupe announced an 8-day trial separation from Johnny Weissmuller, which he discovered through a newspaper article. Lupe explained, "If we can no longer stand each other, I will sue for a divorce. I love Johnny, and he loves me, but we have 2 terrible tempers. We fight all the time." Despite this, the couple soon reconciled. However, on January 2, 1935, Lupe filed for divorce, though they quickly made up once again. The final straw came one evening when Weissmuller returned home and found that his dog Odo wasn't there to greet him. Upon inquiring, Lupe claimed a stranger had entered their home and poisoned the dog. After further questioning, she confessed to killing the dog herself. Containing his anger and refraining from violence towards Lupe, Weissmuller went over to Lupe's parrot, a gift from her ex-lover Gary Cooper, which constantly squawked, "Gary." In a fit of rage, Weissmuller killed the parrot by snapping its neck, threw it at Lupe's feet, and declared, "Goodbye, Gary." He then packed his bags and left her for good. In early 1938, Lupe filed for divorce on the grounds of physical and mental cruelty, describing Weissmuller as a caveman who would break furniture and sometimes hit her with the pieces, and who also withheld money for her beauty treatments, a serious grievance for Lupe. The court granted the divorce and ordered Weissmuller to pay $200 weekly and alimony for 3 years. Lupe received their Beverly Hills home and its furnishings. Talking about their marriage later, Lupe said that their volatile tempers made cohabitation impossible, but that they truly loved one another. She felt it was better for them to be apart, as they were both unhappy during their 5-year marriage. Weissmuller would go on to marry 3 more times. Lupe, however, never remarried. In 1933, Velez featured in The Half-Naked Truth alongside Lee Tracy and Hot Pepper with Victor McLaglen and Edmund Lowe. In 1934, she appeared in Palooka and Strictly Dynamite. both also featuring Jimmy Durante. During the same period, Velez portrayed Slim Girl in Laughing Boy alongside Ramon Navarro. The film was quietly released and received little attention. While it had unfavorable reviews overall, Velez's performance was praised. She and Navarro became friendly, and they were both caught up in a raid over alleged communist sympathies, which you can hear more about in our video on Ramon Navarro, which is linked on screen now. The charges against them were ludicrous, and Lupe flipped on her me no understand persona when pressed with any questions. She enjoyed more success with a brief role in the all-comedy cast film Hollywood Party, where she won plenty of laughs in an egg-breaking routine alongside Laurel and Hardy. Her transition to the sound era had been an unexpected success, given her strong accent. However, her transition to the Hays Code era was proving a far greater challenge. The easygoing and morally unconcerned audiences and society of the 1920s had been replaced by a more sanctimonious crowd by the 1930s, and conservatism was the order of the day. Lupe's personality off-screen was one thing, but her wild and sexually charged roles on-screen were no longer viable. The government figured what audiences really craved were films that built moral fiber and kept the heart rate at a serene pace, not sex, scandal, and wild tales of crime. Pressed on her wild ways and success by the press, Lupe showed her true self, well-spoken, self-aware, and unabashedly honest. When she answered, "What do I attribute my success? I think, simply because I'm different. I'm not beautiful, but I have beautiful eyes and know exactly what to do with them. Although the public thinks that I'm a very wild girl, actually I'm not. I'm just me, Lupe Velez. Simple and natural Lupe. If I'm happy, I dance and sing and act like a child. And if something irritates me, I cry and sob. Someone called that personality. The personality is nothing more than behaving with others as you really are. If I try to look and act like Norma Talmadge, the great dramatic actress, or like Corinne Griffith, the aristocrat of the movies, or like Mary Pickford, the sweet and gentle Mary, I would be nothing more than an imitation. I just want to be myself, Lupe Velez." Despite being a popular actress, MGM Studios chose not to renew her contract in 1934. Over the following years, Velez worked independently for various studios, including a 2-year stint in England, where she filmed The Morals of Marcus and Gypsy Melody. She returned to Los Angeles in 1937, appearing in the final segment of the Wheeler and Woolsey comedy, High Flyers. After her divorce, and as her film career declined, Lupe was keen for some positive media attention. She felt she couldn't appear in public alone without raising questions about her social life. At a party, she met Clayton Moore, a young, handsome 26-year-old contract actor, still years away from fame as the Lone Ranger. As the party ended, Lupe invited Moore to dinner, explaining she needed publicity to revive her career and wanted him to accompany her to prominent Hollywood spots. Moore was taken aback by her proposal. He was intrigued by her beauty and fame, but he nevertheless hesitated, saying, "I'm sorry, Miss Velez. I don't think I can help you. I'd love to, but I can't afford it." At that point in his career, Moore couldn't manage the expense of high-end nightclubbing. Lupe reassured him. "Don't worry about that," she said. "These won't be dates. It's strictly business. I'll take care of everything." Interestingly, Moore found himself getting along exceptionally with Lupe, discovering that her Mexican Spitfire persona was merely a public front, adopted to meet fan expectations. Privately, she was surprisingly intelligent and composed. However, Moore also witnessed her bouts of deep sadness as she grappled with her depression and career decline. Together, Moore and Lupe frequented the most popular Hollywood venues, including the Friday night boxing matches that Lupe enjoyed so much. During these outings, Lupe skillfully manipulated the media, and Moore was soon regarded by the press as a stable companion at long last, with press speculation even rising about a potential marriage. Eventually, Lupe eased out of the relationship, and both parted ways amicably. She had restored her fine image somewhat, and would star in 8 films known as the Mexican Spitfire series between 1939 and 1943, which would turn out to be the most popular role in her career. The film centered around the character of Carmelita Fuentes, portrayed by Lupe, a compassionate yet fiery Mexican singer who leaves behind her career and homeland to marry Dennis Lindsay, a refined and attractive American advertising executive. The character of Lindsay was played by Donald Woods in the first 3 films, Charles Buddy Rogers in the subsequent 3, and Walter Reed in the final 2. The Mexican Spitfire series remained popular with audiences until 1943. The series continued post-Lupe, but never with the same success. Lupe next became involved with Gwyn "Big Boy" Williams, a hefty character actor known for his roles in over 200 westerns, and as a part of Errol Flynn's notorious circle of debauchery and womanizing. Flynn and Lupe had engaged in a brief affair several years earlier, and were still on good terms. Shortly after announcing her engagement to Williams in November 1940, Lupe ended this dramatically while the couple were at Flynn's house. In a fit of anger, she smashed a framed picture of Williams over his head until it broke, and then urinated on his photograph, effectively ending their brief engagement. In late 1941, she entered into a relationship with author Eric Maria Remarque. Actress Louise Rayner recounted Remarque expressing his amusement at Velez's spirited nature, recalling an incident where Velez, in a fit of anger, removed her shoe and struck him over the head with it. In 1943, Velez began a romantic relationship with her co-star from the 1938 Mexican film La Zandunga, Arturo de Cordova. De Cordova had recently relocated to Los Angeles after securing a contract with Paramount. Velez disclosed to gossip columnist Luella Parsons in September 1943 that she and Arturo were engaged. This was despite the fact that he was married to Mexican actress Ana Arana and had 4 children. She told Parsons about her intention to retire after marrying de Cordova, so she could focus on homemaking and cooking. However, Velez called off the engagement in early 1944 when Dorkova's wife refused to grant him a divorce. In 1944, Lupe was set to star in a Busby Berkeley production titled Glad to See You. However, her arrival in New York was deflated by no one being sent to receive her, which infuriated her. She immediately called Berkeley to vent her anger and returned to Hollywood. The production ultimately folded in Boston before it could make its Broadway debut. Lupe's final romantic endeavor was with Harold Maresch, a 27-year-old unemployed actor from Austria who used the stage name Harold Raymond. Raymond regaled others with his tales of heroism during World War II, claiming to have fought against Nazis and been imprisoned in Dachau, from where he supposedly orchestrated a daring escape to the United States. However, there was no substantiated evidence to corroborate Raymond's accounts of his wartime experiences, or of his journey to America during that tumultuous period. Despite skepticism from Velez's circle of friends, who suspected Raymond of exploiting her, she disregarded their warnings and plunged headlong into the relationship. As usual, she extravagantly praised Raymond's sexual prowess, claiming her previous relationship with Gary Cooper was trivial compared to this new romance, and it seemed that their sexual relationship was about to provide something none of her previous ones ever had. In September 1944, Lupe found out she was pregnant. On November 27, 1944, Lupe announced her engagement to Raymond, but she hadn't actually confirmed his willingness to marry, merely assuming he would after learning of her pregnancy. Raymond only agreed to the marriage after learning from the newspapers of Lupe's announcement and her pregnancy. He coldly demanded a written acknowledgement from Lupe that this was the sole reason for their marriage, and demanded the child bear his name. Refusing to be demeaned, a heartbroken Lupe retracted the engagement by calling Luella Parsons on December 10th of that year. On December 13th, 1944, a deeply despondent Lupe Velez visited the Trocadero to meet with friends Estelle Taylor and Benita Oki, wife of actor Jack Oki. There she told them of her exhaustion with life, in a heart-wrenching outburst saying, "I know I'm not worth anything. I can't sing well, I can't dance. I'm getting to the point where the only thing I am afraid of is life itself. I am just weary with the whole world. People think I like to fight. I have to fight for everything. I'm so tired of it all. Ever since I was a baby, I've been fighting. I've never met a man with whom I didn't have to fight to exist. I am tired of life." Lupe's film career had dwindled. She was no longer the striking beauty she once was, and she was pregnant by a man who did not love her. Overwhelmed by her circumstances and in a state of bipolar depression, Lupe decided her life should end in a manner she felt befitting of the star she believed herself to be. She meticulously prepared for her final act, getting her hair and nails done, decorating her bedroom with gardenias and roses, and lighting candles all around. Dressed in her favorite blue satin pajamas, she took to her vast bed and consumed 75 Seconal tablets with brandy, crossed her arms over her chest, and awaited the end. The next morning at 9 a.m., her chambermaid discovered her and immediately contacted the police. The first officer on the scene remarked that Lupe appeared so tiny in her large bed that she resembled a toy doll at first glance. The Hollywood Reporter noted, "Lupe Velez was glamorous to the end." Lupe left behind a note addressed to Harold Raymond, lamenting, "May God forgive you, and forgive me too, but I prefer to take my life away and our babies before I bring him shame or kill him. How could you, Harold? Fake such a great love for me and our baby when all the time you didn't want us. I see no other way out for me. So goodbye, and good luck to you. Love, Lupe." The Los Angeles County Coroner's Register ruled her death self-inflicted due to Seconal ingestion, and that it was motivated by shame over being pregnant with an illegitimate child. However, in the years since, many have theorized that it seems unlikely that Velez would have been entirely motivated by the prospect of being a mother to a child born out of wedlock. It has been since speculated that her answers that day were motivated by an undiagnosed mental illness, such as bipolar disorder. However, a more sensational story emerged among the public, thanks to the false recounting in Kenneth Anger's Hollywood Babylon. It was rumored that Lupe, overwhelmed by the mix of pills and alcohol, had vomited in her bed, then staggered to the bathroom where she accidentally slipped, fell into the toilet bowl, knocked herself unconscious, and drowned, a fate which would have been a dreadful irony, given the elaborate preparations she had made for her final earthly moments. This version, though widely debunked, persists in the lore surrounding her death. It's perhaps unsurprising, given the dramatic nature of her life and the public's fascination with her persona. This version of her death became so embedded in the public consciousness, it was even parodied on the shows Frasier and The Simpsons. However, medical reports contradict this, and Seconal is notorious for being incredibly fast-acting, making her death likely to have been almost instantaneous at such an enormous dose. The day following Velez's death, Harold Raymond made a statement to the press, expressing his confusion over her death. He claimed that despite their breakup, he had agreed to marry her so the child would be legitimate. Raymond admitted to requesting Velez to sign an agreement indicating that he was only marrying her to give their unborn child a name, but he attributed this action to a heated argument they had had, stating he was in a volatile state of mind. Robert Slatzer, who later made wild claims he had a clandestine marriage with Marilyn Monroe, said that a few weeks before Velez's death, he conducted an interview with her at her residence. During this encounter, Velez allegedly disclosed to Slatzer that she was pregnant with Gary Cooper's child, but Cooper was married to Rocky Balfe at the time. According to Slatzer, Velez said that Cooper refused to acknowledge the pregnancy, insisting that Harold Raymond was the father. Following Lupe's passing, Slatzer purportedly confronted Cooper about the situation, and Cooper acknowledged there was a possibility he could have been the father. Slatzer also asserted that he interviewed Clara Bow, who had previously dated Cooper in the 1920s, and remained close to him. Bow reportedly disclosed that shortly before Velez's death, Cooper phoned her in a rage, saying he intended to beat up Harold Raymond for impregnating Velez. Bow allegedly told Slatzer she never believed Raymond was the father, and was convinced Velez had sought to coerce Raymond into marriage to protect Cooper, who she still loved desperately. It's easy to imagine that, if Cooper was indeed the father, his rejection of Velez and their child, along with the prospect of raising a child alone, might have precipitated Lupe's mental anguish. Furthermore, Johnny Weissmuller Jr. remembered the death of his father's ex-wife as shrouded in mystery. According to Weissmuller Jr., Velez's housekeeper discovered her body and notified not the police, but Beau Ruse, Velez's business manager, who then summoned his friend, Beverly Hills Police Chief Anderson, to the scene. Weissmuller Jr. claimed that Velez had arranged to meet Raymond that night, and this was why she had adorned her room with flowers, dressed in a negligee, and spent hours creating this beautiful scene. Her second and fatal ingestion of Seconal was either intended to calm her nerves for the meeting, or was a dramatic but unsuccessful attempt to intimidate him. Additionally, Weissmuller Jr. also said he believed that the baby could have been fathered by Cooper rather than Raymond. The truth will likely never be known, but speculation remains over the true authorship of her final note, and who was protecting who in those first few hours after her body was discovered. A funeral service for Velez was held on December 22nd at the mortuary at Forest Lawn Memorial Park in Los Angeles. Pallbearers included Velez's former husband, Johnny Weissmuller, and actor Gilbert Roland. Following the service, Velez's body was transported by train to Mexico City, where a second service was conducted on December 27th. She was laid to rest at Panteón Civil de Dolores Cemetery. Several directors observed Lupe needed to psych herself up for her Spitfire scenes, standing alone momentarily before bursting into her animated character. Once the scene ended, she would immediately relax, visibly drained. Toward the end of her life, Lupe confessed how exhausting it was to maintain this persona. People close to her, including Johnny Weissmuller and Clayton Moore, said this image was just a facade, and that privately she was an intelligent and fun-loving person. Her earlier roles showed a much wider range of her talents as a singer, dancer, and even a capable, dramatic actress. She was a trailblazer, as the first Latin actor to star in her own Hollywood series of movies. And if there is one thing Lupe Velez always did, it was to be extravagantly, wildly, and completely Lupe Velez. Thanks for listening. We hope you had fun riding the roller coaster life of Lupe. If you want to help out the channel, then please consider becoming a YouTube member or joining our Patreon. Starting from $1 a month, you'll get access to exclusive content, like photos and mini essays on the history of Tinseltown, as well as polls to vote on future videos and discounted merch. At the moment, our $3 tier on Patreon and YouTube membership is investigating the history of the mysterious Vinecrest development, once meant to rival Hollywoodland. And why not take a look at our online store, where we have a range of stylish Hollywood Mysteries merch. That's all for this episode of Hollywood Mysteries. Sweet dreams.